Hello, this is Dread from Apprentice's Corner. And today's video topic is going to be me making a tier list for all the rogue skills because I believe rogue has been out long enough and we have tested the skills thoroughly to the point where we can pretty much tell which ones are going to be really good and which ones are bad already. This is after the patch D, I believe, patch C or D, after the nerfs, the major nerfs to shift, I believe it was, yeah, major nerfs to shifts and Dancing Strike. So if anything has happened after this, obviously the tier list will change, but I thought I'd give you guys a good look at which skills you should be building around and which skills you should be not thinking about too much here. Alright, so we got the music on this time because why not, right? So we're gonna start out with a Shadow Cascade. We're gonna measure these by either damage or good damage skills, you know, like Shadow Cascade, yada yada yada, or good utility skills like Shift, right? So we're gonna like scale it by that. So if it doesn't do damage and it doesn't do utility, then it's F or D in this case. So Shadow Cascade. Shadow Cascade. Let's hop in game here. So Shadow Cascade has been busted since the moment they released it. So the biggest issue with Shadow Cascade, it does a few things. So while you're dual wielding, it makes like an attack around you, but the reason why it's so strong is because it can be utilized with the shadow system. And what that means is some of your skills as a rogue create shadows that will repeat your skills after you use that specific skill. In this case, it'll be Shadow Cascade. The reason why this is so strong is because we have a lot of, you know, obviously we have a lot of shadow creators in the terms of Synchronized Strike, Smoke Bomb, Shift, especially Shift. Shift is like the big one, right, when it comes to this. But yeah, that's what makes Shadow Cascade a little insane. Another thing about Shadow Cascade is it has this node here mainly as well, where Shadow Cascade deals more damage multiplicative with per 1% increased melee attack speed you have. This is absolutely insane. If they're gonna nerf anything on Shadow Cascade, I think this is one of the things that they need to touch, because I think that getting 120% more damage multiplier from just playing the build how you normally would is pretty insane, right? I do like the fact that you can scale attack speed, right, and scale the damage, but I think that it's too favorable of an outcome in comparison to some other mechanics. Now we also have the Synchronized Strike Shadow Cascade build that's been running around, where you pretty much refund all your mana with Fight in the Shadows and Onslaught, and then you get Gloomstalker, which gives you a shadow and kill. So the way this works is if Shadow Cascade kills something and summons a shadow, it will immediately after that cascade to the other shadow. So it will cascade throughout the pack, hence why it's called Shadow Cascade, right? Well, I think this node is in tune for a nerf as well. I think 30% is enough. I don't think 40%. I think 40% is a large amount of things. Like, it's huge, by the way, 40%. But yeah, this is probably going to get nerfed. This is probably going to get nerfed. The strongest nodes here are Leverage Momentum. You have Flow State. You have Crushing Darkness. Crushing Darkness does not matter because you're not scaling it with your own attack speed, right? Because you're triggering it off of other skills. Like for instance, in this case, most of the time for me, what I've been doing, I've been triggering it off of Shift, Shadow Cascade over Shift, but you can also use it in tandem with Synchronized Strike for insane AoE. It used to be getting gigantic AoE thanks to Synchronized Strike, but that was fixed, but it still remains in its spot as S tier here. The one issue it does have is this zone here, the Dagger Dance. This is, I'm going to be honest, this is whole of a waste of a part of the skill tree, because the biggest issue the daggers have is you just don't have enough of them, and they're very unreliable for single target. Now, this could be a good idea once, especially thanks to the Shadow Dagger buffs, right? But the biggest issue is, even if you go full investment into Hurricane of Blades, it's not really much of a hurricane of blades, you know? So, especially with how much mana per second it costs, I'm very curious as to why this doesn't throw more daggers out. I don't think it's really worth it, because so I could see this side getting buffed. It also has a lot of bleed synergies as well, which would be very strong if the amount of daggers that came out actually made sense. Now, this is supposed to be utilized with shadows, right? With the Gloomstalker and all that. So maybe there is a way you could utilize it where you go down into Onslaught, into fighting the shadows and Gloomstalker, right? And then you use Hurricane of Blades and stuff, right? That could definitely be a way. But as of right now, a 60 mana cost per second for how little of daggers it throws, it's not worth it. Even if you're shifting with Synchronized Strike and all that, and you're proccing it from other means, it's still not enough daggers to make it worth it, in my opinion, as the regular version of Shadow Cascade is just way too strong in comparison. So either nerf Shadow Cascade overall so these nodes look a lot sexier, or obviously, buff this side. I would like to see this side buff. I think the biggest issue overall with Shadow Cascade is I don't like how it gets so much mana back, especially after the devs have told us multiple times that they don't want mana to be a big, they don't want it to be easy, they want it to be difficult, right? So that's the biggest issue we have with it. So with all these things taken into account, I can safely say, even after nerfs probably later on down the line, that Shadow Cascade will continue to have an S tier rating. Now, Synchronized Strike, it's like as if we were just talking about that. So Synchronized Strike, this is the more busted part of the interaction per se, because of how many shadows you make. So Synchronized Strike, it's supposed to be utilized with the shadow system to create shadows to, obviously be able to create those situations where you use Shuriken or Shadow Cascade, right? And you kind of blow up the screen. Well, it's very strong with Shuriken. It's very strong with Shadow Cascade. Acid Flask, it's more of a meme right now. But so the biggest issue that the skill has is it just offers so much utility on top of being busted with Shadow Cascade. If it wasn't for this little interaction between mana gain per shadow and the Onslaught, then Synchronized Strike would be a lot less strong overall. It would still be strong, but it wouldn't be S tier. It'd be more like A tier-ish, because it's like just being able to pump out so many shadows doesn't matter if the cost is 40 mana, right? But since you can bypass the mana cost, right, that's what makes it insane. You also have this node here, Dark Alloys, which creates 2 extra shadows, which is not even an issue for most of the Shadow Cascade builds, which is kind of funny, right? You also have a lot of other nodes that are really nice for like other kinds of playstyles. Like for instance, you get Crimson Shrouds when you use Synchronized Strike. This is currently the only realistic way you can get Crimson Shrouds is like a Bleed Shuriken build. So it's insane with Shurikens, right? Because all the other sources of Crimson Shroud on the tree, right, they only give it to you on melee hit. So this is essential to any kind of like Bleed Shuriken build, right? And also you get Bleed Chance on them as well, Fist Rit, like you get insane amounts of utility. You also, even on top of that, you are granted increased attack speed for 3 seconds of Synchronized Strike. It hits at least one enemy. That's a 25% more damage multiplier to Shadow Cascade on top of the whatever you get from the attack speed, which buffs, obviously your shurikens and everything, right? You just have so many options, and you even have the Shadow Dagger stuff now, which works, by the way. It works now. I don't really like it, but it works. Yeah, and you could even almost play it as its own skill, almost, but definitely it is the strongest when combined with Shadow Cascade. Those are pretty much the nodes that matter. Everything else is kind of like random, right? Like, not really what you want. Also, shadows created within 4 seconds of using Synchronized Strike restore health on creation. This is insane. This is an insane amount of HP sustained, by the way. Insane amount of HP sustained. So we are just gonna go ahead and give Synchronized Strike S tier right after Shadow Cascade. Right now we have Lethal Mirage. All right, Lethal Mirage. Lethal Mirage was a busted boy at the beginning of the expansion because of an interaction where Lethal Mirage could make more than your Lethal Mirage could exceed the normal number of your shadows way more than it should have. Like for instance, you'd have like 5 shadows max. You could have like 9 or whatever, right? And Lethal Mirage deals more damage per shadow and also has extra mirages per shadow. If you don't know how it works, the way it works, it's kind of like Flicker Strike, where every single mirage is a single attack, and in the tree you can increase the amount of mirages you have. And it was absolutely insane with specifically this node here. Here it is, Sundering Blows. Sundering Blows used to not have a cap. Well, Boardman definitely made sure that they made a cap. So yeah, that was pretty insane, right? But any kind of Lethal Mirage is insane because the iframes that are associated with it. Sure, it's on a 10-second cooldown, but you have like as long as you go for mirages and stay away from the mirage creation speed, right? You can stay in that iframe for a very long time, making it very, very strong. Then of course you have like Shadow Cascade stuff you could do. You can create shadows with it. You get extra mirages per shadow, more damage per shadow. You can set up a gigantic bleed stacking build with it. You can even go lightning with it if you even wanted to. I don't know why you would, but like there is so many options that this gives you that it's absolutely insane. Now obviously it's on a 10-second cooldown, so it is keeping it from being absolutely nutters. So, and especially after the nerfs where you're not like one-shotting, you know, fucking bosses or whatever, I will be putting in A tier now because it's strong, but it's not strong enough to merit its own build, if that makes sense, because since it has that 10-second cooldown, you can't really make your own build out of it, right? But that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I like skills like that. Like having extra iframes, having like extra utility, stuff like that. Like it very strong single target skill, so I enjoy it a lot. You can also use it for AoE if you want to, but it's not that strong for AoE, clear. All right, Dancing Strikes. Dancing Strikes also. All right, so if you guys didn't know, Dancing Strikes recently got a nerf. So the way Dancing Strikes work is you attack with 4 different separate attacks, which works really well with flow, right? Where you get the increased damage every 4th stack of flow or whatever, or you can make it 5, yada, yada, yada. But the issue with it is it has a 0.7 cooldown on the skill, right? And it also costs 3 mana, which I'll talk about in a second why that's annoying. But since because of that, right, since it has a cooldown, it does not scale off of attack speed as like good as other skills, which makes it really poor in my opinion, because if it doesn't have attack speed to scale, it needs something to scale its damage. Like for instance Shadow Cascade has a node about that. Where is it? Shadow Cascade had this node. See, if Dancing Strikes had this node, and Dancing Strikes had this node in its tree, right? Even at half capacity, right? Even at 50%, that would still, oh, sorry, wrong tree. That would make Dancing Strikes into a better skill overall because there's no way of investing, right? There's the main way we used to use it is all of these increased damages, all these increased damage like Graceful Arena, Rhythm. I don't know why this is still bugged, but it keeps saying more, but it shouldn't be saying more. But yeah, all these increased damage buffs and all that, they all used to be more damage. And that made Dancing Strike, sure, it wasn't doing enough damage on its own, but it was like almost S tier utility because of the arena, because of the more damage multipliers, because of the 40% more damage per time you use Lethal Mirage, by the way, that they nerfed this as well. So this node's completely worthless in my opinion. Like it was a really good utility skill and it's really strong, but thanks to the nerfs, it's kind of fallen from favor per se. It has a lot of other issues, like for instance, all the support nodes. So since Dancing Strikes can't be used as its own damage skill, we've been looking at it through the lens of utility skill. Now, it has very strong utility, even after the nerfs, because of the damage taken in Arena, right? The Arena is very strong, but we haven't found a good way of dealing damage while in Dancing Strikes form, because there isn't much support for it. For instance, we have Windmill Ballet, 30% chance to Shuriken on the 2nd and 4th attack. That's not enough, bucko. Like 1 point? No, that's not enough. If you could put 2 points into this or something, then you could actually play kind of like a Shuriken blade shield build or something of that ilk, where you just play with the blade shields and all that, and you kind of just shred enemies as you're dancing strike around, that would work. But sadly, you can only put one node into this. I don't know why they went around this. Like, you could easily make it 2 points. Like, Dancing Strikes is not an OP ability, so just giving it more options in general, more synergy points with the other skills, would not make it overpowered, in my opinion. We also have this node, Hidden Blade. You have a chance to use Shadow Cascade when you use Dancing Strike, right? Well, that's 1 in every 10 Dancing Strikes. That is not enough to sustain itself. Like, if this was like 20%, if you could invest 5% per node for 4 points, I would so hop on that. 20%, that means almost every single rotation you do a single Shadow Cascade, and that would be very strong. But as of right now, I just don't think 10% is enough, especially in this kind of meta where Rogue has a lot better tools. It has a lot of other things that are really cool about it. Like, for instance, Shadow Steps. You increase the mana cost, right? But you increase the mana cost, but it gives you shadows for your own Shadow Cascade. It gives you shadows for your Windmill Ballet if you're playing like a Chakram build with it. Like, you have Rhythm. Rhythm needs to be buffed. It needs to be 4 seconds. Rhythm's really hard to utilize in the current state of the game because you're not going to be constantly holding down the Dancing Strikes button, especially since all the synergy points are so weak, right? And then, of course, you have like this whole side of the tree that it's focused on dots. 1 second here. You have this whole side of the tree, right? It's focused on dots that doesn't do anything. Like, you can't make a skill that doesn't scale off attack speed work with dots. That doesn't work. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. It seriously doesn't work. It's so poor, and it's sad because I want this to be a good skill because it's a very strong skill. Like, you even have the split chains inside the arena. You have like all these things that would work if just simply these nodes, specifically like Shadow Cascade and the Windmill Ballet, if these nodes were just a little bit higher in power level, right? If we could put in a few more points into these, it would make this way better of a skill. And sadly, because of the nerfs and everything that has happened to it, it used to be like A tier utility, and now it's D tier because it doesn't have a purpose. It is not being used and probably will not be used until it gets buffed. They have talked about it. They have said that the nerfs does leave Dancing Strike in a very poor position. So they are talking about buffing it. So at least we know that, right? All right, we have Multishot. Do I even need to tell you guys? Do I even need to tell you guys about Multishot? Our Lord and Savior Multishot? Yeah, we're just gonna... Yeah, we don't need to talk about that skill. We don't want them to nerf it. So, like, it's more like right here. It's kind of like in between because like Shadow Cascade might get nerfed, so who knows? But yeah, Multishot S tier. I'm joking, obviously. Let's actually look into skill here. Where is it? So Multishot here. It works like Split Shot from Pee-wee or that Amazon skill Multishot. It's very strong. Has insane coverage, insane damage thanks to the idol it has where you get increased damage per arrow you have in Multishot. So investing into projectiles makes your damage even stronger, right? Like, just the fact that it has a damage idol versus like all these other skills, like just the fact it has a damage idol, right, is what makes this so strong. If it did not have the increased damage per arrow, it would not be as strong as it is right now. And it would be a lot more in line with the other marksman skills, but because of that idol existing, and we have other skills that have this issue as well, like look at Vengeance. Vengeance wouldn't be as strong as it is right now if it didn't have damage idols. So maybe give us more damage idols for skills. Maybe I would enjoy that. Like, I would love to see a Detonating Arrow skill that makes it so the whole Detonating Arrow does increase damage, but the area is smaller. Like, give us more options, right? And that's what I like about this specifically, is it can do almost anything you want it to do, right? You can make it do dots, you can make it do on hit crit, you can make it go attack speed, you can make it go big hit crits. Like, there's so much in this tree that you can do, and it's insane. And this is what I want the bar to be for skills, but hopefully it becomes the bar for skills. They were talking about how Rogue is becoming the bar for most of their development time now. So yeah, S tier. So this is Dark Quiver. Dark Quiver has an interesting issue with it. So Dark Quiver has an issue where it doesn't synergize with the skills it's meant to be used by. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Dark Quiver, it's really strong with the marksman has a setup where you go for the most mana as possible on the skill, right? Like you have like 100 mana like skills, right? Absolutely insane amounts of heavy like mana, right? And then you use this node here, ethereal arrows, to deal 500% of that increased damage as 500% of that bow mana cost is damage. So if you have like 100 mana cost, you get 500% increased damage. Now this is very strong, but the issue is since you're spending so much mana on skills, you need to get an oomph out of it, right? You also have like sources like coated blades that help as well, but you have all these sources, right? You have all this support, but the main support piece, i.e. Dark Quiver, kind of just doesn't work with it. And what that matters is because Dark Quiver, the way these builds work, right, is you use a really big mana cost skill, like, you know, Hail of Arrows or Detonating Arrow or whatever, right? Really big mana cost skill, right? And then use a small mana cost skill, like for instance Flurry, 0 mana, or Cinder Strike or whatever, to create mana for you, right? So that you can use your other skills. Well, what happens is, the way Dark Quiver works is you shoot it up in the air, it creates like small little arrows that you can go and pick up, right? And that's very strong, mind you. And you can deal increased damage, you can deal more damage, a lot more damage, you can deal increased damage. It has support for every single bow skill in the game. But the issue is you end up using the arrows on the support skills like Flurry or Cinder Strike way more often than the actual skills themselves. And that it causes a little bit of an issue, right? Because it's like, well, I don't have the mana to use the skill, but I also want to pick up the black arrow when I have the chance to pick up the black arrow, right? Because they spawn in random spots. So while you're in arena, you don't have the time to pick up arrows, right? You just don't have the time. It's not a thing. You're gonna die. You're gonna die because you're gonna go try to pick up an arrow that you can't, right? So I really think that if Dark Quiver was not consumed by zero cost skills, or if they made it so that there was a node that turns off, disables zero cost skills from working with Dark Quiver so that our big skills can get a buff, I really think that would make this a lot better than it is right now. But because of that little interaction there, I'm going to put Dark Quiver kind of like B tier utility. It's very close to being S tier or A tier, but the fact that you can only have one arrow up at once, right, on your bar, and you can't pick up any more. If you could pick up multiple arrows, this would be much closer to S tier, by the way. And then, of course, obviously, it doesn't synergize with the skills it's supposed to synergize with, which causes a lot of issues, right? So that's B tier. All right, Hail of Arrows. Hail of Arrows, it's a sad story. So Hail of Arrows before the nerfs, where's it here? Hail of Arrows is a really strong skill. It takes your bow damage, right? And then it turns it into a damage over time component, kind of like in an area, you know, right? In an area and its duration. Now, there are a lot of ways of building this skill, right? You can go poison, right? You can go poison, damage over time. You can go poison ailment. You can go bleed, or you can go bleed physical damage over time, or bleed ailment over time, right? And then, of course, you have the elemental stuff, right? You can go crystal arrows, or you can go for scorched earth for fire damage, because you just want to turn to elemental damage so it works with some of the pain points in the tree. And then, of course, all that, right, combined with this node here, Sky Strike. Hail of Arrows now also shoots a barrage of arrows on you, dealing full of physical damage. So it adds an on-hit portion to the attack, which can be scaled by all the more damage in the tree. And you don't have to worry about duration with this version, so you can go for less duration here and all that, right? That's why Sky Strike is so strong. I've made multiple Hail of Arrows builds, so pretty much I know what I'm talking about, hopefully, right? But so one of the biggest synergy points with Hail of Arrows was the fact, since it was a duration skill, right? The duration variant, right? You could utilize shift, right? These nodes used to say more damage, right? You would get a shit ton of more damage after shifting, and that would give you all of the damage scaling you needed for your Hail of Arrows duration, because since it's duration, it keeps that more damage multiplier for the entire time it's raining down, right? So you can invest into duration, you can invest into acid rain, you could make the poison variant, and that would work. It would actually work, right? But now, after the nerfs to shift, the poison version just doesn't work. and the only version I think that is viable right now, anywhere close to viable to multi-shot, by the way. None of these skills are close to multi-shot and viability. Like they're kind of close. Like Detonating Arrow is kind of close, but nowhere near as close as multi-shot. So mainly because they don't have their own damage idle skills. Like they don't have that. So that causes them to be a tier less, which is sad. I really hope that they fix that. I really do not like these skills getting all these damaging idols, and then none of these other skills get shit, right? So the main way you do it is you go Sky Strike, you buff the mana, so you get a gigantic mana cost using a bunch of nodes here. Where is it? Mana wrap and all that. Then you just chuck out the largest hail of arrows you possibly can that you can sustain, right? And obviously this would be better if Black Arrow worked a lot better with it, yada yada yada. And since it's elemental, it can work a lot with all the elemental synergy in the tree with elemental barrage. You have all this flat damage, like all this stuff. It would work really well. But because of the nerf to shift and all of that free damage for these kind of skills are gone for the big mana skills, right? Big mana skills, it's just not worth it anymore, sadly. So hopefully they look into it. Although Hail of Arrows crit with Sky Strike can still do work. It's just not gonna be, it's not gonna be anywhere near the multi-shot, which is an issue right now, right? So it was very close before, but now it's not. So we're gonna put it like C tier because there are a few builds that work, mainly the on hit crit. Well, everything else is not worth it. All right, we have Detonating Arrow. Detonating Arrow is an interesting skill, so it's been used a lot of late because a lot of people have been experimenting with it after the grand multi-shot experiment. So the way Detonating Arrows work is you shoot something into an enemy and then it detonates after 0.7 seconds. So there's a delay. Now, is that delay very long? No. So the reason why Detonating Arrow is supposed to be very strong is because, first off, it uses added bow damage applied, so 150% of the explosion effectiveness, which is very strong because you can get a lot of flat thanks to the tree, thanks to Elemental Arrow, right? You can get a lot of flat. But the main way it's been utilized is you go up here into Quick Detonation, into Barrage, so that you don't have an arming time and it creates a cone. And then you go up here into Arcing Blast, which is kind of like a lightning blast on your Detonating Arrow once it explodes, and it works exactly like that, and it uses your bow damage and all that, and it's very strong. But the issue with it, I mean, the reason why it's so strong is because it hits so many times, right? Because it hits once with the cone, once with the arrow itself lodging in the enemy, right? Then it hits, which by the way, immediately goes off if you have Barrage. Then you have all the tendrils, but one tendril can only hit one mob at a time. But as you can tell, that's a lot of freaking hits, and it can do a lot of damage. And I think this skill is in the line of being able to compete with multi-shot. The biggest issue that Detonating Arrow has over multi-shot is multi-shot covers the whole screen, while Detonating Arrow covers a small portion of the screen. Obviously, you make it really large, but that's a lot of investment in comparison to multi-shot just adding extra projectiles while also getting more damage, well, increased damage, and also getting more AoE, right? While Detonating Arrow has its issues, right? Mind you, this is a very strong skill. It's just being outshined by multi-shot, right? There's the poison version, which is really cool because it turns all your shock chance, all of it, into poison chance. So it's a very unique build around skill. I still need to play around with this. I just don't like how it feels because you're putting a delay on top of your delay, and square root of delay is delay, right? And it feels bad, right? But it has a lot of options, a lot of different ways you can build it. So this is like really good skill. It's just being outshined by how Dark Quiver kind of sucks up your Dark Quivers as you use zero cost skills. If that didn't work, then Detonating Arrow would be much stronger right now. Also, if Shift never got nerfed, it would be a lot stronger as well because you're kind of going for the big one shots. You're not going for the sustained DPS that like multi-shot does. So the multi-shot nerf hit this one hard too, but not as hard as Hail of Arrows, right? You can still play this build. It's very strong. So I'm going to put Detonating Arrow in A tier. Right after Lethal Mirage, in my opinion, after the nerfs of Lethal Mirage. Shift. I'm just gonna put it S tier because no matter how hard they nerf it, the best, like this is the only skill that is mandatory on every single rogue build. It just has so much utility. It has Shuriken throws, so if you're playing a Shuriken build, you can also go down here in vulnerability while shifting. You can make it cost 0 mana thanks to the deck's mana efficiency per dex. You can go up here, get the Acid Flask on Departure chance, so you can get the haste, because Acid Flask, where is it? Has a lot of utility. It gives you haste on use and gives you the Effectuous Pools, Armor Shred, all these kind of nice little things. Turns your shift into multiple skills, kind of like Transplant in that way. Pre-nerf Transplant, where is it? Very strong in that capacity. You also have the Jade Arrow mechanic, which is kind of like the Black Arrow mechanic, but better in my opinion because you get it on shift and it allows you to, you know, set things up properly. The combo, you can crit multi, damage over time. Like, this is very insane. This used to all be more damage. They removed it because they said that they don't want global more damage buffs being in the game. So I'm like, why'd you even introduce it in the first place? It's whatever. You have bleed support with like puncture or whatever. I don't think this part isn't as good because it's kind of difficult to, what do you call it? It's kind of difficult to merit this because it's only one attack, and bleed stuff is really good if you hit multiple times. So I don't know how well this is. We have the movement speed, the 50% increased movement speed for 1.5 seconds. Absolutely insane. If you get Smoke Weaver, you can bring this down all the way to 2 seconds. Absolutely insane build, by the way. Shift Shadow Cascade build. Create a shadow after shifting, which is works for Shurikens and your just everything, right? Including your Lethal Mirage. It's just everything. It works for everything, right? And then you have Shadow Cascade after shift, which procs your Shadow Cascade for free without having to actually use it, which means that you can proc Shadow Cascade chains without costing mana, which is absolutely insane. So shift definitely 100% deserves its S tier rating. Like, I'm gonna be honest, it's the best skill in the game. Best skill in the game for Rogue, because it's just so... It's such a good tool, and it has so many different ways of building it. It just instantly gets S tier. All right, we have Puncture here. Puncture is one of those interesting skills that has a melee damage component and a bow damage component, meaning that if you switch between them, you can do different things. Now, Puncture is really cool, where it's one of those skills that gives you increased duration with your ailment to make up for the fact that the puncture itself doesn't really attack that very fast, or multiple times. So that definitely almost makes up for it. So you can almost go a bleed puncture build. The biggest issue with bleed puncture is the fact that the AoE is small because it's not supposed to be an AoE skill, and that causes it to have a little bit issues down the road. This is a very good single target skill. You can go bleed. You have frenzy in the tree. Very good utility skill, by the way, as well. You have utility as well. You get the Effectuous Toxin, which is good for any damage over time build. You can turn it into poison chance. You get the bleed stacks. This stack is global, so it works for everything, right? Literally works for everything. Then of course you have this part where you get the Shadow Dagger chance, which is kind of cool. Melee range. They did recently nerf it so that the bow puncture does less damage every single time it pierces versus like the melee puncture, because the melee puncture, the issue is you have to get into melee range, which automatically makes the melee puncture worse. And instead of buffing the melee puncture, they decided to nerf the bow puncture for some reason, which makes no sense in my opinion. Right. Then you have like this charge stuff that works really well with the on-hit component of the bow puncture. Really bad for the melee puncture because that melee range per second charge is absolutely worthless. I would rather have width. Width would be way better. Like if this hit like shield bash, right? This would be a much better skill. Right. You also have this Penumbra Ambush, which creates 2 shadows side by side with you to do damage as well as you're doing damage. But the issue is, since they can't hit the same target unless the target's huge, it kind of makes it terrible, right? You're spending mana for not much in terms of AoE, right? You have much better options. That's the bigger issue. Much better options. You have a really cool way of building it as well with the maximum ailment count. So if you can make it so that you can consistently get 5 negative ailments on an enemy, that's 35% more damage for free, right? Like there's a lot of ways to build puncture, and it's a really strong skill and will be a strong skill. Did get nerfed for literally no reason, by the way, but it's kind of like B in my opinion. It's right after Dark Quiver. It's more useful than Dark Quiver because you can use it like even unspec puncture is strong for like the mana gain versions of like the bow skills and all that. So it it's very middle of the road, like average, what I would call it. Smoke Bomb, A tier, right below S tier here. 1 second here. Right below S tier. The reason why that is, Smoke Bomb is a utility skill, not as strong as Shift, but it gives you a lot of utility. Create shadows for your shadow cascades. Very strong, by the way. Just throw down a Smoke Bomb. You have the Shadow Dagger stuff, which is cool, right? It works. You also have you also get Crimson Shrouds on kill, which is another way of getting Crimson Shrouds as a Shuriken build. You get bleed chance, 200% bleed chance with your Shurikens all inside the smoke cloud. That's very strong. You got the backflip, which is more maneuverability. You also have the Silver Shrouds. Silver Shrouds are very strong because it makes you dodge your next hit. You also have this Ignite stuff, which is a meme in my opinion, but that's a different story. You also have Shrouds. Shrouds are very strong as well in it, as you get a shit ton of Shrouds. You can turn up the duration, make the cloud get really large. Like, there's a lot of ways to make this very strong, and I am very, very, very happy with how Smoke Bomb has been, because it's the best way to introduce a utility skill without making it overpowered like Shift or whatever, right? So it is definitely deserves its A tier, solid A tier. Then of course we have Ballista. Oh, Ballista. Sorry, it's F tier. So Ballista has a lot of cool ideas. So Ballista, the way it works is it's a minion. It's kind of like a totem that gets dropped down and shoots arrows, right? Now, normally that would be very strong, but it has an issue where it has a very low amount of attack speed in the beginning. And you get attack speed per point of dex and stuff, so this is really strong for dex stacking. But even with 80% increased attack speed, even with all this more attack speed on the tree, right? It just doesn't feel good enough, in my opinion. Like, I think that there's just too much of a delay on summon. There's too much of a delay between attacks. It's really hard to build around because of the damage effectiveness, where your damage effectiveness applies to Ballista. It has a lot of issues with that. You also have the crit chance, which is very strong. Like, these are all very strong, mind you. The biggest issue it has as well is you don't get Pierce for free. If you just got Pierce for free, if they just removed this node and just made Ballista's Pierce automatically, I think Ballista would actually be competitive. But because of the fact that you have to put in 5 points to get this Pierce, makes it very difficult to suggest as a good build. It's very good single target, like S tier single target, but you don't need single target in this game. Like, go to Monolith, it just takes 5 minutes, you know, it doesn't matter. You also have the Bolt Rain, the chance to shoot extra projectiles. That's such a pain because the attack speed is so low in the beginning, so it's very poor in that way. You also have a lot of meme stuff where you get the explosive delivery and all that, but all in all, the biggest, like, I think it's a lot better for ailment builds because you can get the ailment effectiveness and stuff, and get the frenzy, all that kind of stuff, right? You can get all that. You also have some black quiver stuff that's really cool with it, but like I said, Black Quiver has, Dark Quiver has its issues because it's very strong with these nodes. Very strong. But the issue is like, who the fuck is picking up 4 quivers in, or is it 10 seconds of duration, right? The duration is way low on it. It can be 15 seconds and then increase with Sturdy Foundation, or give us idols that give us duration. If I put down a Ballista, and Dark Quiver is pretty much the only way of making it work right now. If I could place down a Ballista and actually get enough quivers to make it last a while, and like, I would love a node here that increased the duration by like 2-3 seconds per time I pick up a Dark Quiver. I think that would make it way fucking better. So I hope that that gets added, something like that. But as of right now, because of all of the issues it has, it's just F in my, well, D in my opinion. F, D, whatever. Shuriken, A tier. It used to be S tier, but they nerfed a specific node in it here. Where is it? They nerfed Keen Throw. Keen Throw was giving you way more damage than it should have, and you're doing a lot more damage with it, right, than you should have been. So that's sad to see it go, but that's fine. Hit damage Shuriken is just as strong as ever. It's just not OP broken strong. Shuriken, you can go with Bleed. You can go with the AoE version where you kind of go EK. I've done that version. You can go with the Blade Shield variant for absolute insane single target. That's very insane where it kind of goes around you. It's kind of like Blade Vortex. You have insane amount of utility. You have Fizz Shred, Poison Shred. You have physical penetration. You have the backflip. You have the increased armor, by the way. Just so you know, as a rogue, if you did not know, since you get 30% increased armor per shuriken, if you have 7 shurikens, which is the max, right, for the blade shield, you get 210% increased armor, which is absolutely insane with this node here, perfection. The perfect armor stack per perfection. You have like, I think it's like 50 per, so you get like 500 flat armor from that, and that's enough to scale enough armor for it to actually matter, right? So, and the fact that you can cast it off of your shift as well with Keen Throw, when you slide a hand, it makes Shuriken like very strong utility, very strong damaging skills, has multiple ways to play with the lightning damage variant, with the bleed variant, with the poison variant. You have so many things you can do with it. You even have the backflip, because why the hell not, right? You can summon it off of shift, you can summon it off of dancing strikes, although I think that node needs to be buffed. Yada yada yada, right? You have so many ways of playing around with it. The unique with it is very strong, as it gives you 2 additional shurikens, poison chance, and crit multi, everything you could ever want in any kind of shuriken build, pretty much except for the bleed shuriken. So maybe I'll make a poison shuriken. But yeah, like with all that, it just insane, absolutely insane. So we're gonna put that at A tier. The only reason why Shuriken isn't higher on this list is because all these other skills are even crazier. Acid Flask, B tier utility, it's S tier utility but F tier damage, so we're gonna put it B. The biggest issue with Acid Flask is you can't really build around it right now due to some issues with it. The biggest issue with Acid Flask is it does not shotgun. What that means is you have these nodes that gives you the extra flasks, right? But enemies can only be hit by 1 flask per throw. Well, as an ailment build, that kills it. That automatically kills it. If this did not read that line, it would actually work as a damaging skill. You could play Poison, Acid Flask, but because of that, just that one, it's amazing how one line in a skill can ruin a skill, right? It's amazing, right? But yeah, just because of that, it ruins the whole skill. So as a damaging skill, it's very poor, right? But as utility, it's almost S tier, because you get armor shred, you get poison pools, which gives you the infectious toxin, 10% more damage. You have poison shred, you have haste in it as well when you use it. You have frailty, you have slow, you have the ignite version, which doesn't really work right now because you can't get hit by multiple acid flasks, so the on hit portion also is poor because of that, right? You could go ignite with it as well if it wasn't for that. You just have so many things that makes it very strong. You even have poison duration. So if this version actually worked with Toxic Salvo, I believe that they could easily just get rid of this line where enemies can only be hit by 1 plaster throw. I think if they just got rid of that line, I think it would be an insane skill to use. But well, not even insane, it would just be strong, right? It's kind of the Tempest Strike syndrome, where one line in the skill's keeping it from glory, and it wouldn't even be that overpowered even if it didn't have that line. So it's kind of being cautious for no reason, right? So it gets its B tier. Cinder Strike. Yes, recently I played Cinder Strike. Cinder Strike has an issue. Biggest issue Cinder Strike has is there's only one way to build it, whether it be melee or ranged. You cannot go on hit Cinder Strike. It doesn't exist. There's not enough more damage in the tree to make on hit Cinder Strike work. But Ignite Cinder Strike works very well because of this node here, Firewalker. Cinder Strike deals increased fire damage over time per point of dexterity, right? So if we have 4% increased damage over 4% increased damage here, and then 6% increased damage here, that means you get 10% increased damage per point of dex, making dex stacking very strong. You also, so if you have like 80 dex, you have 800% increased damage over time with all of your ignites. Absolutely insane, by the way. I think that's very strong. Then of course we have Flammable Toxins, turns all of our poison chants into ignite chants. Absolutely S tier strong, makes it so that you can build around ignite. You have insane amount of ignite effect in rogue idols and on their gear, so ignite strong. You also have oil coating on hit, which gives you a lot of percentage damage scaling as well. Very insane. I'm usually at like 10 stacks with the melee version. I don't know about the bow version. I believe Trickster made the bow version. I haven't really looked into that much as of yet. There's also elusive, get a lot of flat dodge. You can even go for elemental damage so that you can use it as a support skill for something like hail of arrows or whatever, right? For mana, very strong in that way. Make even throwing damage, doesn't really matter because throwing damage on hit is kind of useless right now. You even get ignite effect and fireman, this is insane, by the way. This node right here is absolutely insane. You can even get more mana if you want to, right? This is very strong as well for like Cinder Strike support builds, right? Very strong in that regard. You also have the daggers. Daggers just give you more hits so that your ignite chances, right, just gives you more hits, and I believe it shares the same things from Flammable Toxins and Firewalker, so very strong single target. Fire breathing is really strong AoE. It's just very strong overall. Bow Cinder Strike is absolutely amazing, like ignite, and then of course melee Cinder Strike is okay. Deck stacking is very strong with it. This entire part of the tree right here, about here, you kind of like cut it. Well, okay, you cut around the area here, and then you go around, kind of cut this out as well, and then you cut all of this out, and then bam, all this is worthless because just it's not worth it. Well, except for this node, yeah. You want the attack speed with some versions, but yeah, that's pretty much it for Cinder Strike. It's very strong skill, very strong support skill. Definitely deserves an A tier. It's a little bit less strong than like maybe say Detonating Arrow. Decoy S tier. Do I even need to talk about it? Right here, right before Shadow Cascade and Shift, but right after Multishot, because Multishot really wouldn't be a build without Decoy. What can I say about Decoy? Decoy is just like Bone Prison with the taunts, absolutely insane. Throw it down. This is the only reason why Marksman is showcasing high arena waves right now, is because of how strong Decoy is. If they nerf it, Marksman will suffer, but it's been very strong. You can get Marksman Decoy charges. This node doesn't work right now for some reason, so it's not increasing the cooldown, which is annoying. There's everything in it. It gives you utility, it gives you haste, gives you frailty, armor shred, more armor shred stacks, fear. You don't really want the fear, by the way, it gets you killed. Even go ignite with it. You can even make your own version of it where you run like the remote detonation or whatever. You like go with the memes, right? Like you go with like the small explosions. You can go with like throwing Decoy ignite kind of build. Obviously the cooldown sucks, so it's not really that good, but it has its purpose. Like for instance, you can do ignite, you can do like there's a lot of things you can do with this, and I'm like that it's not like it's amazing. But like I said, the biggest issue it has is the fact that it has an 8-second cooldown. Obviously it'd be busted, although I would like to see a version of Decoy that gets like where is it, a node here or something that gives you 300% increased cooldown recovery speed, but turns off the taunt aspect, so you could play a Decoy build that was a throwing attack build with the, you know, destruction and all that. That'd be really cool. I would enjoy that. But absolute S tier of a skill. Flurry S tier. Why is that? Why would I ever say Flurry's S tier? Well, Flurry is S tier in utility, my friend. Where is it? Flurry can be used while using a bow or an attack. So the bow version is terrible for damage, but it's amazing for utility because you get the mana on hit, you get the adrenaline rush, you get the attack speed, you get more attack speed, you get all these kind of things, right? You get all this poison chance, bleed chance, everything. Flurry's absolutely insane for utility, the bow version. That's what you use to get all your mana back. It's absolutely insane. It's like Vengeance, but better in this case. And of course, you have the melee version, which is very strong with ailments. Bleed or poison Flurry is absolutely nutters because this 30% more, this 30% more, it hits 3 times. You also have Shockwave, which turns it into a semi-melee skill, very strong. Just on crit hit, Flurry works as well, kind of. You have to max out this node. You have to do a few things, but yeah, it does work. But yeah, it's absolutely insane. The only reason it's not higher up on the list is because everything else is stronger. Because, you know, obviously Rogue, right? And that's been my tier list for the rogue. With that being said, just so you know, this is my opinion, and these are subject to change as patches come out and as new things are discovered. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your evening, and bye!